Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. El-Hindi, for being here today. The issue of illicit financing and money laundering is hitting home in the most personal and tragic way in my district, where we've seen ongoing violence perpetuated by MS-13 and other Central American gangs taking innocent lives and threatening the safety of our schools. Money laundering is a key tool for these violent criminal organizations that are tearing apart peaceful communities on Long Island and across our country. It allows them to hide their drug trafficking revenue and transfer it illicitly across the border, is how they buy weapons and fuels the growth of their dangerous criminal enterprises. Earlier this month, we saw the senseless and tragic murders of 4 young men in Suffolk County, New York, which only further cemented our need to solve the gang violence crisis on Long Island and nationwide. These murders have gotten the attention of both President Trump and AG Sessions. 2 of the victims of these murders perpetuated by MS-13 were residents of my district, and tomorrow Attorney General Jeff Sessions will be visiting this community of Central Islip, which has been shattered by these senseless murders and other acts of transnational gang violence. Mr. El-Hindi, we know that FinCEN, as the national experts on combating money laundering, is playing a key role to defeat threats to America's safety and security. Now more than ever, we need coordination on all fronts so that our local law enforcement on the front lines can respond to this grave threat, working with other state and federal agencies. My first question is just asking for you to speak on the effort currently to combat the threat of MS-13.
With respect to priorities that we have in FinCEN in terms of our focus, transnational organized crime, narco-trafficking, gang activity are within those priorities. When you mention federal, state, and law enforcement working together, federal, state, and law enforcement all have access to the data that FinCEN has, and they all have access to the support that we can provide. To the extent that law enforcement is focused in terms of investigations and gang activity, we are there to support them and make sure that they have the best use of the information that we have.
Can you walk me through how FinCEN flags suspicious financial activity at the local level and then shares this intel with local law enforcement, especially in dealing with transnational criminal organizations like MS-13?
So we have a memorandum of understanding that allows access to our database at the federal level, at the state level, and in many situations at the local level with certain municipalities. When we have an MOU with the municipality, they have direct access to the data. In many instances, however, they can work through a state coordinator to have access to the data as well. In terms of the products that we put out, where we identify a methodology or a trend, those can go out to a wide variety of our law enforcement stakeholders.
The Bank Secrecy Act puts the onus of reporting suspicious financial activity on banks, but what about violent gangs that are increasingly using apps and other technology, prepaid cards, and various other non-bank instruments to launder money? How is FinCEN intercepting and monitoring those transactions and working with the local agencies on that front?
So we cover more than just banks. Money transmitters are subject to our regulations, and some of the methods that you mentioned for moving money electronically that might involve apps, to the extent that that activity gets into the realm of money transmission, which it often does, those financial institutions, we consider them financial institutions, are covered under the scope of our requirements. They're required to file suspicious activity reports. They're required to have programs in place to enable them to identify illicit activity and make themselves resilient to that. So that is the type of information that will go into the database. In terms of new methods, for example, FinCEN clarified in 2013 that virtual currency, exchangers, administrators of virtual currency are actually money transmitters and subject to the scope of our regulations. And we find that by working with that industry, we are able to get valuable information to law enforcement.
Well, I appreciate that, and we certainly have law enforcement from all different levels of government and electeds and community leaders, just everyone's engaged in this very important issue in Suffolk County. Again, as I mentioned, AG Sessions coming to Suffolk County tomorrow. The president himself often talking about this issue that is in our community in Suffolk. So anything that you can possibly do to be able to assist with this effort, it's an urgent effort for my local community, and I would certainly appreciate all of your help. I yield back.